Fearless. Provocative.
Straight talking.
We pledge to say it like it really is.
With dignity and respect.
Committed to free speech and common sense.
Upbeat and entertaining.
Straight talking and direct.
We may agitate each other and you.
Heartfelt and passionate.
Thought-provoking, provocative and controversial.
Fearless and truthful.
Welcome to The Pledge. We pride ourselves on being straight-talking and provocative, just like the new leader of the free world. The election of President Trump is a pivotal moment in human history, discussed in every nation across the globe. But for one young man, the President-elect's 10-year-old son, it was all a bit much, and he'd clearly much rather have been in bed. Who can blame him? In this Trump special, Afua says the only winner here is white male supremacy. Rachel says the wall won't and should not be built. Greg wants to talk about the New World disorder. And Michelle says she's going to be talking about flat caps and whippets. We look forward to that. But first me. Greg, stay awake. I don't know about my other pledges, but I've had a fascinating week. I was in New York to cover the presidential election, and I've had such a laugh. No, not at the incoming president's extraordinary hair. Bit jealous, Greg. Nor at Bill Clinton's outrageous suggestion his wife Hillary should triumph because, and I quote, it's her turn. No sense of elitist entitlement there, eh? Rather, it was the comment of a bleeding heart American commentator who almost wept as she said, our nation has been betrayed. Excuse me, as they say over there, just as here in the UK, and with increasing force across parts of Europe, voters have turned their backs on snooty, careerist politicians whose only touchstone with normal people is when they fall over in front of them getting into a limousine. The Liberal commentators who espouse their causes, and where is June Sarpong when you need her, are just as much in the dock. They're as out of touch as a linebacker in the Super Bowl, the wrong side of the sideline. The jury's out as to whether the US called it right this week, but let's celebrate the real people having their say. Oh, and please don't tell me the election I've just come back from was only an advisory.
Well, at least we've got finally an admission from Nick that the referendum result is up for grabs still. Hooray!
I hadn't thought of that when I wrote that.
I cannot go through the 7 stages of grief as I did over Brexit.
Right.
From denial through anger. America is rioting on the streets.
No, that's just ridiculous.
Hundreds of people, they're rioting outside the US Embassy.
They're not...
The dreary filmmaker Michael Moore said the UK voted to leave Europe. America has voted to leave America.
And what does he mean?
Now, he has a point there.
Tell me what you mean.
Well, because it's America first. It's about America on its own. We're going to have a border. We're going to have a wall.
You just don't get it. You just don't
I
get
do
it.
get it. I do get it. The
there
more
are 50,
we criticise...
Can I tell you, this is the revenge of the deplorables.
Sure.
That's what Hillary Clinton called
I'm not denying
58 million people, who, for many of whom, they're not in work. Some of them are taking home less pay in real terms than they were in 1999. Not decades. 2 terms of Clinton have simply made it worse. They had 2 terms of Obama. It's made it worse. Why should they stick with a system that clearly hasn't helped them? They've had enough, and that's what they were doing.
I can see why they voted for Trump. I don't think we should dismiss them as a basket of deplorables. That was one of many huge mistakes that she made. But I pity them because I think they're going to be the losers here, and this is another comparison with Brexit. Just like the people who voted Brexit, who have real and legitimate senses of grievance and a sense of that they're losing control of their lives and that things aren't working out for them. What Trump is offering them is not going to solve their problem. He's not addressing the real reasons why they've seen their incomes decline, why they've seen their jobs go, why American industry and manufacturing hasn't found anything viable to replace it. The idea that tariffs, mass deportations, building walls is somehow going to restore America to its form, it's a lie. And you say that, but what is he going to do that's going to fulfil the promises he's made to these people?
He'll have a virtual wall. He'll put lasers in or something like that. He's not going to physically build a wall. That's what he'll do. That's the way.
Nick, also, I mean, you always turn it back to some sort of liberal elite because that's your obsession.
Yeah,
actually,
I like to keep you involved.
What they're angry about, well, it's very nice of you, but what they're angry about is not the liberal elite. What they're angry about is the bankers. They're angry about the hedge fund managers. They're angry about the financial structure. But they're angry about the 20% who have done very well, while they, 80%, I think, of Americans, have not had a real increase over 10 years.
They're angry that they see someone such as Bill Clinton, since he's left office, has amassed $151 million. Now, that may be what he's worth. Perhaps he's worth double. I've no idea. But these are people living in a trailer park in North Carolina who can't even afford to run their Chevy truck. Don't be surprised they've had enough.
No, you can see they've had enough, as you saw here. You know, if you went to Burnley or Hull or anywhere else in Brexit, exactly the same. It's people saying, we've suffered and you haven't, which is exactly true. What no one has got is the solution to that. Now, Trump's solution to that is barriers, trade barriers, you build up Fortress America. You spend a lot of money on infrastructure, which is, FDR all over again. Yeah. All of which conceivably could work, but probably a disaster. What it certainly means is those very same people will no longer buy shirts for £2, or they'll be paying X much more for their iPhones, for everything else, because that's the effect of it. I mean, the real truth is, you look at the big American success stories, the Nikes, the Apples, they don't make anything, or make very little in America. It's all made in China. Once you stop it being made in China, the price doubles.
How would it have been different under Hillary?
Oh, I don't think it would.
So it would have just been the same?
No, this is. I don't think this comes down to the narrow the politics between. I mean, you can have a very strong argument against Trump for all sorts of other reasons, but I don't think we know what to do about a group of people who've got left behind. And in America, it's a very large group of people.
But for me, what I was really surprised about is how many people were completely surprised by the outcome. And so many people, and again you see it with Brexit, when you sit and you're on social media or traditional media, all you're seeing is, again, these people being called stupid, thick, racist, bigoted, and it's exactly, for me, it mirrors Brexit again. And the fact that so many people are so shocked is the problem for me, because they do not understand and connect with the people that are experiencing the lives that are different to them. And they sit and they are absolutely mortified, and the only conclusion that they can reach is, oh, it's those thickers over there, it's those thickers, I'm not like that, I'm better than them. And that, for me, is the problem. All the time that you have this massive divide, you will keep seeing it. We had it here, we've now got it in America, and it will continue in other places. France.
I think that's a simplification. I mean, like here, actually, in America, more than half of people actually voted for Hillary. It's a deeply divided country. It's not that this is the vast majority and that this tiny elite don't understand them. People are really polarised. As strongly as people feel that Trump is going to solve all their problems, the other half of America feels like he is the end of the country that they know and love. The alt-right movement, which is actually one of the groups that's triumphed out of Trump's election, this kind of alternative right that's kind of been bubbling away underground. They say he's not an economic president. It's not about his policies. He's a cultural president. What he represents is the resurgence of the America that existed before the civil rights movement, that they'd like to see America return to a time before we had a multicultural country where we had the language of rights and respect for people. And that's what is so divisive. And I don't think that you can just write it off as people being out of touch with the needs of real Americans. America is divided down the middle. What you do about that, I don't know. But I can't see how a president making promises he can't keep is going to solve the problem.
But he represents change, doesn't he? A lot of people, when they're on the exit polls and stuff, they wanted change. They wanted anti-establishment, they wanted anti-elitism. And the irony is, of course, he's significantly wealthy. To a lot of people, he would be regarded as fairly elite in the lifestyle that he lives. But they don't care about that. They don't regard him in that respect. They just regard him as a change, and that's what they wanted.
And Nick, what will happen to Trump in 18 months when he hasn't managed to deliver anything, not even a tax cut? Let's say he hasn't got through a tax cut through Congress for those who are paid less than $25,000.
Well, we're getting ahead of ourselves, I don't know. But I thought, to speak to Afua's point, the reality is that two terms of Obama has not increased these people's lives. And there's a brilliant line, which I'm going to quote directly. I'm going to steal from Richard Littlejohn in the Mail today, which is, under Obama's presidency, they've talked more about which toilet a man should do than they have about an Iraq war. That has consumed. This president was completely unfocused, did nothing for those people. It is not surprising that they've taken the action that they have.
But you're assuming there are things you can do.
What's the point of having a president?
Well, that's the point. Politicians promise things that they can't deliver always.
Well, let's hear a few words from the man himself. This was his acceptance speech back on Tuesday night.
Now it's time for America to bind the wounds of division. Have to get together. To all Republicans and Democrats and independents across this nation, I say it is time for us to come together as one united people. Time. I pledge to every citizen of our land that I will be president for all Americans. And this is so important to me.
And that, Afua, speaks very much to the divided nation. I mean, no one can question his sentiments. Do you think it's attainable?
I think it's interesting talking about how disillusioned people are with the political class, that he felt he had to say one thing to get elected. Now that he's been elected, he seems to be rolling back on it, which is a relief to me. It was a relief to hear that, but I noticed that the audience was significantly less enthusiastic when he started talking about let's thank Hillary. No, when they came on stage,
they still shouted lock her up, didn't they?
They were saying lock her up.
But also, if you watch that speech, the first half was clearly written by someone else and is on autocue.
Yes.
And the second half was a shambles of let's have Bill up here, let's have John up here.
It's a beautiful thing.
I mean, it was
just him following autocue is a massive leap of progress.
Well, you could see it was autocue because you could see me something like that. I mean,
well, here's something to gladden your heart. I don't know if you've seen this image that is going around of Hillary Clinton signing a particular picture. This is the front cover of Newsweek magazine. And there we are. She's actually signing Madam President. Now, Newsweek, every election since I've worked there, always does 2 covers so they're ready to press. But you see, you're so happy now, aren't you? If that had only worked for you.
Yeah, no, I think it's a real shame.
Because?
I mean, but she's not Madam President.
Yeah, because why?
How long have we got?
Go ahead.
Listen, she lost it because she talked about first world problems and gender and the glass ceiling, and he talked about jobs and immigration. And look, bingo. People cared about jobs and immigration. They don't care about the soft snowflake subjects.
All right, on the subject of the glass ceiling and where women stand now, well, this week's US election result may be a win for Donald Trump, but the real victor is white male supremacy. Trump is the ultimate white lash, the political embodiment of a beleaguered masculine ideal, a wall-building, gun-toting, crude-talking, make America great again fantasy. And thanks to his views on women, there is, for the first time ever, a grabbing president hashtag trending on Twitter, a phrase many of us in our darkest nightmares could never have even imagined existing. Trump is the ultimately divisive political figure, but his victory is merely a symptom. The cause is the crisis in masculinity, and America's future, especially the future of its women and its ethnic minorities, is its latest casualty.
Well, they're still crunching the numbers, of course, but if it's such a disaster for women, perhaps, Afua, you can walk me through, as regards white women, more of whom voted for Trump than voted for Clinton. Why would that be?
So I chose my words very carefully, and the reason I said it's a crisis of masculinity rather than a crisis of men is because I think there are many white women, and it is overwhelmingly white women, not minority women who voted for Trump, who also subscribe to the ideals of white American masculinity. And when I say that, I don't just mean a man. I mean the whole concept of somebody who builds a wall, who talks about protecting Western civilization, who talks about keeping Muslims out. It's all bound up in this idea. And if you look at the alt-right movement, who I mentioned earlier, they talk very much about how feminism is a kind of lesbianic conspiracy that's designed to rob men of their rightful place in the world, how America has lost itself. It's lost its pride in its guns, its pride in its Western cultural identity. And this is what people have been fighting for, and that's why they say Trump speaks to them. That's why they call him a cultural president. I think that's what he embodies.
Do you think when groups of men get together, I don't know, on a rugby tour or whatever it might be, in a cricket dressing room, do you think they say inappropriate things?
Well, if you would believe Trump and his supporters, that's just perfectly natural locker room speech.
So
I personally think is a huge insult to the majority of men that I know would never speak
Why
like
don't you
that.
ask the question? Do you think a bunch of blokes who've been playing rugby or playing cricket, do you think they say inappropriate things?
I don't think they speak about women in a way that demeans them.
And so if they do speak in that way, that is to be held over them for the rest of their lives? That absolutely
I don't think it's to be encouraged or condoned.
Agree. Hang on, I never said encouraged. But do you not think this happens a bit?
Clearly.
Men watching here now.
This isn't what... There's two things I want to say to that. One, this isn't just about what any man says in the locker room. It's about what the now President of the United States says and what people think it's appropriate for a leader. Who sets the tone for a nation and potentially the world says. And secondly, this backed up by action. I mean, I'm not going to bore you with all of the allegations and things that have been proven that Trump has done.
I'm not supporting them. But
so it's
not
not just rhetoric, Nick. It's not just rhetoric. This is somebody who's actually followed through on his rhetoric.
Do you honestly think that every politician has led a blameless sort of Cinderella or Sleeping Beauty or Prince charming lifestyle. They've all said and done. That is the real world. Real people sometimes say really bad things. I don't think it should mean that they can never, as long as they apologise, they don't continue to act.
I've been in locker rooms, going to football matches and rugby and cricket and squash all my life.
And is this confession time?
I have never heard that sort of language, ever. Now, it could be that I play with a different sort of people. I certainly wouldn't when I play with Donald Trump. But I've never heard that. I've never heard that sort of...
That absolutely astonishes me.
Well,
I've heard that kind of language so many times, and I've heard groups of girls say awful things
that
if actually...
Words that we can't use to talk about fellas. Right.
I'm trying to pick my words carefully, but if I had conversations that we've had on a girls' night out transcribed, I'd be in an awful lot of trouble, as would groups of men that I know. Doesn't mean we're bad people, doesn't mean that, they can't do a public job. It just means that sometimes people have banter that they regard as banter that other people would regard as offensive. And I'm going to be doing... My topic a bit later is about political correctness, and we just need to be a bit careful that we're not hauling people over the coals too much for what conversations they have in private.
I think the interesting thing about that tape is when was it released and why? Because actually, if they held it another 2 weeks, Hillary would have won the election.
What, the tape about him
The tape of him grabbing...
But everyone thinks it's disgusting.
The word we're not allowed to use.
The problem is it spoke to some voters. I mean, there were women who voted for Trump who said, actually, I liked him more when I heard that. It made me realise that he's a normal guy, you know, and that I can relate to him.
They didn't get
it speaks to just kind of how dysfunctional the views towards gender are in America and how divided it is that people are willing to either overlook that or actually be impressed by that
I also
in their
think,
president.
Nick, that you can't get away from the fact that we now have someone in the White House who does rate women 1 to 10 and talk about them in purely in physical terms. And, who is he going to bring a woman into the White House who's not a sort of former super glam beauty queen type? We need to see women represented. I think that whoever... Women, I think I felt incredibly let down, and my daughter has not really spoken since Trump became elected. She's 22. She's too upset to talk. But Afua has a point. White women voted...
Sorry, I would never say anything inappropriate about another person's children, but you're honestly telling me your 22-year-old daughter has hardly been able to speak?
I think you're massively underestimating the impact
this has on women.
My daughter, she can always speak. But, I mean, she's devastated.
No, I'm afraid we can't overlook this has been a bloody kick in the face.
It's an uphill struggle for young women to be taken seriously, to assert themselves, to say, I have the right not to be violated, and to see somebody on the ultimate pedestal on the world stage, to talk about women as a piece of ass, to rate them 1 to 10, to talk about grabbing them without their consent.
He's
apologised, but he did it. This isn't just a Liberal speaking. The Republican Party had to distance itself from their own candidate. He was so offensive.
He did it in order to get elected, because he knew there was an audience for this sort of misogyny.
No, that tape was while he was a TV star.
He was an audience both among white men and white women for this, and
I'm not supporting these comments. I really want to get that out. I'm just saying it doesn't preclude you.
If he grabbed me by the bits, he'd get a smack in his face. He wouldn't get very far at all. So I don't agree with what he says. I think it's absolutely disgusting. But I think saying, I'm so aghast I can't talk, I don't understand that. I can't get my head around that, honestly.
My thing here about the crisis of masculinity is not just about the comments he's made about women. It's the fact that this is a president who gets up and talks about the size of his penis. In a formal presidential debate forum. It's about the president who makes lewd jokes constantly, he invokes a very specific notion of masculinity in the way he speaks. Surely you can accept that. I mean, it's well documented.
I'm saying I'm not supporting these comments.
And I'm not raising this. I'm not raising this to demonise the people who voted for him. I'm raising it because I think it is a really interesting question about what is going on in America and the world that is somehow appealing to people.
I think a lot of them voted for that despite that. They didn't say, I agree with that. I think they cared. What they cared about was that my job's going. I'm in a bit of America where that closed down, that factory closed down, that works closed down. There's nothing left. Is anybody going to do anything for me?
I think there's a real message for the media, as they thought, and this is possibly why maybe people who supported Democrats probably do consume media more. They read newspapers and magazines and TV, but because when the email gate, the 650,000, that undoubtedly kicked Hillary's campaign a lot. The problem with Trump was every time they put out these negative comments, it either firmed up the vote
or they just didn't care, or they just didn't engage. And I think they have to learn that. The Democrats had actually played a really stupid game in reality. And every time they talked about it, people said, you've got to love the Donald.
But
you heard what he's done now? He's great, isn't he?
But this wasn't a Republican campaign. This was a Trump campaign.
Yeah, you're right,
this is a demagogue. This is not anything to do with Republican and Democrat. This was Trump against Hillary.
Spending a quarter of what the Clinton campaign
And to be
spent.
fair, I mean, I can't stand the man. I can't stand what he stands. Anything about him. But he ran a brilliant campaign. He understood who was going to vote for him, and he got them.
And the more the Clinton media and the establishment attacked him, the more popular he became, which was a real lesson that, you know, we are regarded as just out of touch, everyone, around this table.
Speak for yourself.
Well, I don't think so.
Apart from Michelle then, and Nick. All right, then, I give you all a free pass.
Well, you've been making an impact in your own way this week. More on that later.
Later. Here we go again. This is Brexit plus, plus, plus. But what does that really mean? Vote Trump and vote Leave both rode to victory on the back of populist battle cries, which promised to build walls and reclaim controls of our borders. Yes, Trump and Brexit campaigners have both won, largely on promises of controlling immigration. But promises. President Trump won't, he can't, be as populist as candidate Trump. There's no way you can build a wall and make the Mexicans pay and kick out 11 million illegal immigrants and stop more coming in. We have to have open, outward-facing societies, not countries that simply promise to put themselves first. Trump and the Brexiteers have played to an isolationist, nativist ideology rather than the internationalist worldview that should be our shared future.
Well, firstly, I don't imagine he's going to be building this wall. It's just not a vision that I can see materialising. But I do think that when he was talking about controlling and protecting borders, I think it resonated with a lot of people. I think he talks about actually protecting his own nation and the safety of his citizens before prioritising the needs of other places. I think that's perfectly fine. I think that's what people want to see, and I think that's what he should be doing. I think there are things that he can do. He talks about checks on people coming in, checks on balances, making sure that actually people that are coming in are not going to be a danger. Nothing wrong with that. I would like to see that happen. He can put controls on the number of people that are coming in and the skills of which those people have. And again, I think that's absolutely fine. I don't think it's a problem. I think that we need to understand it's something that a lot of people feel passionate about, and also understand that some of the things that he said are ridiculous and unenforceable, such as banning all Muslims. It's not going to happen. That was a silly thing to say. Building walls ain't going to happen. Pretty silly thing to say. But I think it's getting the balance right. That's what he needs to do.
Greg, do you think that Trump is going to come up against the problem, which is that you can't have borders without free movement of people? So he's going to have this balancing act between free trade and immigration.
There was a great, a great movie about 40 years ago. Yeah. You know, when I was young.
You weren't even young 40
called The Candidate with Robert Redford, right? And Robert Redford was standing to be the senator in California, and he was the outsider, and he did Trump. He wasn't the same sort of crude language, but it was the same sort of thing. Populist slogans all the time, bang, bang, bang. And the film finishes, and he wins. And the film finishes, they can't find him. And in the end, they go to look for him, and he's sitting on the toilet. And he looks up and he says, "What do we do now?" Now, there's a bit about Trump is, what do we do now? We can say all this stuff. We get the votes. We've now won the thing. Got to do some of it. If they're not going to build the wall, I mean, the wall almost epitomises the whole thing. And if they don't build the wall, then come next election, everyone will be saying, well, what happened to the wall?
His constituency won't care.
He's the Wizard of Oz, isn't he?
Because, as I said earlier, they'll put laser lights or something like that. He will be able to parlay it into something that will keep it. I didn't build a wall because I didn't want to waste that money. Instead, I've got laser tracking beam. That's what he'll do.
I think you're underestimating the expectations. You know, they think he's going to put Hillary in jail. You know, they think he's going to build these walls and kick these people out. And, you know, I mean, there are some things to say in his favour. For example, he's got, unlike Obama, who had a very hostile Congress, you know, he's got a Republican Senate and a House of Representatives. He's going to pack the Supreme Court, no doubt, with Conservatives, which is probably going to allow his legacy. He's going to allow his legacy to go. Well, he's got at least one vacancy he's going to be able to fill. It's probably going to allow his legacy to carry on way into the future. So I think unfortunately, he is going to be able to do real things. But this is the problem, you know. Everybody, we know that politics is kind of broken. That's why people voted Trump. But what's going to happen when they realise that he is not the answer? He's not going to be able to deliver.
Can he reverse globalisation? Because if he if the genie's out the bottle, then he can't deliver any of what he's talking about.
No, he's unleashed a terrible genie from the bottle, because what he's traded on is that capitalism has failed most of middle America. The alternative socialism is completely undesired in the United States of America. So what has come in through the gap, the middle, is populism. So what on earth is he going to do to satisfy the demands of this popular uprising that he's created?
Maybe it is going to look socialist. I mean, he's going to launch these huge infrastructure projects. He's probably going to have to basically borrow huge amounts of money to pay for public sector jobs for people to build.
Yeah. By the way, can we just remind ourselves that national debt is running at 108% of GDP? What's he going to do, Nick?
You just don't get it. Part 2.
Part 112.
No, part 2 today. Regarding immigration. To these people, they see that they don't get jobs or they're held back. And indeed, in this country, they don't get jobs. The schools are full, the hospitals are full. I know for you it means that you get a cheaper Polish gardener or a Filipino woman to do your ironing. I know that's the reality for you. But for the people out there, it means they can't get jobs and they can't get their kids into schools. That's the truth, and that's what played in America. That is it.
They depend on immigration just as much as we do here, which is why I've got my blue collar on.
Yeah. Look at the history. If you look at the history of America, every migrant group hated the next one. That's the whole history of what America was built on. It's built on immigration, and everybody hated everybody hated the next lot coming in. And they will continue to come in because they'll need them to come in. But I don't think that's what the Rust Belt's about. The Rust Belt's not full of them. I mean, it's about industry that had built America, as they saw it, closing down. And it's closed down because vast chunks of it has been exported. Now, can he change that? If he can change that, it's going to cost America. It's going to cost those people. They will no longer be buying shirts for £2, I'll tell you.
I thought it was very significant that on the election of Trump, obviously the peso cratered. But which were the stocks that rose? We had JP Morgan, we had Wells Fargo, we had Morgan Stanley.
Hang on,
where were the general...
they're going to be building walls. They do. They went
no
through the
manufacturing
roof,
stocks went up. Where were the General Motors and the Kellogg's and all those? If he was going to give jobs back to Middle America in the Rust Belt and the redneck states, why didn't those stocks rise? Nobody believes him. He made empty promises to get elected. He told the electorate exactly what they wanted to hear. And he's going to be found out really soon.
You saw that in the acceptance speech, because suddenly in that speech, Hillary had gone from being a criminal who should be in jail, which he said time after time after time, to being a fine public servant and we should thank her for her contribution. You suddenly thought, he didn't like that. The system is now taking over. And I suspect the system will take over, which is why I think he is not the great danger. I think he's a deeply unpleasant human being, and we shouldn't, and a crook and all sorts of things. But I'm getting like him and Hillary.
But unlike Brexit, we've got to accept it. We can't challenge it. These people should just go back to their homes.
It's a bit sad. It's a bit sad because they rejected Hillary because she represented the political establishment, which I understand. I mean, to me, there wasn't anything particularly appealing about Hillary, you know, and I can see why she didn't appeal to voters. Even the ones who voted for her weren't particularly compelled by her. They voted for him because they wanted a change, they wanted something different, they want real answers to their problems. You know, he's a generation behind. The time to be solving the manufacturing problem was the last generation. Now it's automation. Those jobs won't even exist in 10 or 20 years. He can't solve that problem with any of the things that he's offering.
That really pathetic thing that Bill Clinton said all those years ago when he said, why did you win? He said, it's the economy, stupid.
But there are stuff that he can do. So he talks very much about companies that are outsourcing different jobs and different aspects of their business. He can look at things like if they're going to be awarding contracts to organisations that are mandating, actually, I don't know, you need to use local whatever, or you need to be creating the products over here. There are things that he can do. He can also...
What's to stop them voting with their feet? If they imposes punitive regulation on companies, they'll just move somewhere where they can do it more cheaply and more easily. That's the globalised world.
Yeah, but he can also look at...
Trump may not stick to his promises, but here on The Pledge we do. And last week I did make a solemn pledge, which was I would wear double denim on this week's show. Just showing I did. Thank you.
Well, I think it's very impressive. I think we should move on from there. You're not wearing it next week, are you?
No, that's it.
OK, well, The Simpsons predicted it 16 years ago.
As you know, we've inherited quite a budget crunch from President Trump. How bad is it, Secretary Van Houten?
We're broke.
How did they know? But who can predict how the new man in charge will handle the rest of the world? Welcome back. Well, the US has now elected its own Vladimir Putin, and he could threaten the world order in a way we've not seen in my lifetime. The truth is, we don't know what Donald Trump's plans are when it comes to foreign policy. But we ought to be worried. We do know he's said that America wouldn't necessarily defend NATO allies if they come under attack. We do know that he's showered President Putin with praise, and of course the Russian leader was the first to congratulate him. And we do know that Trump says the hard-fought nuclear deal with Iran is a disgrace. Finally, we know he doesn't believe in climate change. He says it was invented by the Chinese. Of course, this could all be populist electioneering, and he may not abandon America's international commitments after all. But with someone as unpredictable as Trump, can we be sure? From the day Trump becomes president, it's inevitable that the world will be a more dangerous place.
So putting all these things together, Greg, I mean, possibly the end of NATO, possibly the end of the free trade system as we know it, possibly the end of the international rules-based law and order. Do you think that we are actually facing, as one person said, the end of the West as we know it?
Possibly, if it all happened. Do you think he can deliver all those things you just said? I doubt it very much. I suspect he's not that. I was listening to someone who used to work for him talking about him and saying, look, his concentration level isn't very good. He doesn't last very long on anything. He flips in and out. And you can't do that in government, because if you flip in and out, there's another whole structure and system that carries on without you. So my guess is a lot of what he said he's going to do won't happen.
But they've woken up in some liberal nightmare where you actually said a person as well-educated and informed as you said, do you think it's the end of the Western world as we know it? And someone, well, not that well-educated, you actually said, yes, it could be. What are you talking about?
What are you talking about?
This is the Western Spring. This is the Western Spring where nations like Britain, people who have been downtrodden for too long, get an opportunity to vote Brexit,
to the rest,
and nations like the US
if you
have
believe
their...
it's the Western Spring...
This is the Western Spring.
OK, and look what happened to the Arab Spring.
Oh, that's
look what it created.
So that's like blaming any spring.
No.
That's a bit absurd.
Spring is the wrong... Spring is the wrong word, then, to use, isn't it? If you call this... I mean, it's not even... It's not even spring.
The Western liberation.
I would turn that on its head.
Classes.
And I think what my question is this the end of the Western Spring? Because everything I've just mentioned happened for a reason. You know, it happened in the last century because of genocide, because of 2 world wars, because of recession that's unprecedented on a global scale. That's why these international trade systems, these international humanitarian and international laws evolved in the first place. So they're there for a reason. It wasn't just some fantastical creation of a crazy lefty.
President-elect Trump's views on NATO actually are absolutely right. Germany is the 3rd biggest economy on the planet. Why shouldn't they pay towards NATO?
Well, while you're mentioning...
There's no reason on God's earth that Germany is one of the big... And they don't have to pay a dime or even a fennick or a euro.
Fine, but can you get them to
Precisely. I don't know, but it's not a bad idea to try.
But if you wanted to increase German contributions, would you do it by a threatening ultimatum?
Well, they've not even tried now. I think it has a lot of merit.
But doesn't...
I won't be voting for you, Nick.
I thought he was wanting people... I thought he was wanting people to commit to their 2% of GDP on the defence spending for NATO. Is that right?
Yes.
That's what he said.
Why do you think that's unfair?
It's not... No, it's not that I think there's anything wrong with getting people to commit to the spending. It's the way he goes about it. He shows contempt for the whole concept of NATO. He's suggested that he's willing to see a world without NATO. Just like he shows contempt for democracy by saying that if the result didn't go his way, he might not respect it. You know, this is somebody who doesn't actually respect the rules that underpin the Western order, the rules of democracy, the rules of collective defence, the rules of international trade. Now, I'm not saying those rules work perfectly for everyone, which is why I asked the question. If we lose those rules, our world isn't going to look the same.
If you look at what happened, I mean, what is coming out of Korea, it's coming out of South Korea, obviously, says that Trump has already said to them, well, we'll continue to support South Korea. Well, that's not what he said in his campaign. And that's why I say there's a lot of things get said if you're his sort of electioneering, that probably won't happen. But hang on, while we're on Germany, let's look at what Merkel said. Mrs. Merkel said when he got elected.
Deutschland Germany and America are connected by values: democracy, freedom, respect for the law, and for the dignity of human beings, independently of origin, skin colour, religion, gender, sexual orientation, or political views. On the basis of these values, I'm offering the future President of the United States of America, Donald Trump, close cooperation.
I think that's quite a profound statement. Because what she's really saying is, if you go ahead and carry on doing what you've said you're going to do and behaving like you've said, we're not part of it.
I think it's interesting he's already contacted Angela Merkel and he says he's looking forward to their first meeting and will she wear lederhosen. No, seriously, some commentators say that she looks very grumpy there. She looks permanently grumpy to me. The relationship between them is going to be so fractured because it was last year, about October last year, where he said that the immigration policy is totally wrong, that German leader Merkel went completely nuts opening the doors. And it cannot possibly continue, and of course that played to his central vote. How on earth that's going to get squared away with Merkel and other European leaders, I don't know. So the only reason I was exploring NATO, and the reason I questioned you over the figures, is presumably if you two think that it's the destruction of the Western world, NATO will somehow...
I didn't say it was
and
the
neither did
destruction
I.
of the
I asked
Western
the
world.
question.
Well, you asked him, but you were both concurring.
No, but the Western
world is...
Your interpretation...
Yes, but what you've got to do, go back to
Conspiracy
what she meant by the Western world was the system that we have used for the defence of the West since the war, really.
Right.
And is that going to sustain? Well, he's implied that if Putin walks into certain countries...
Yeah, but why shouldn't those countries pay, Greg?
Yeah.
If you're in Latvia or Lithuania, why aren't they paying towards NATO? They don't.
No, but all I'm saying, Nick, is that's the change.
Will you pay for my burglar alarm system?
No, you don't get... Do you know, sometimes I think... We could elect you, know. I think you're the... Apart from the sort of sex stuff, you seem to me the British version of Trump in some ways, you know.
I was thinking of that.
You know, you've got a view on everything, bang, in we go, and let's do it.
What Nick was saying, since Brexit and since Trump, we're going to have this wonderful alliance, a sort of... the resurgence of this liberal nation-state is going to take hold across the world and led by Mr. Brexit in America and Brexit Britain. And I find that very worrying because I feel that, you know, Donald Trump couldn't even handle his own Twitter account, did much better when it was taken away. And look who he might be bringing back into the White House.
Well, see, Great Britain and America, see how we're hooking up now? We're going rogue and saying, you know, the people are going to take back control of our governance, really. We're going to be able to say, no, we don't want this globalism. And we can't be telling other countries, other nations, how to sweep their porches if we can't sweep our own yet. So we got to take care of what's going on here within our borders, just like you all have done.
I can't remember, who was it who said of Corbyn that they just, the craziest man in the room? Yeah. Well, I mean, I now feel the craziest man in the world is now in the White House, and he's going to bring in the craziest woman in the world.
Remember her famous statement, you know, that she knew about Russia because
she could see it
from the back room, and you thought, hang on, this doesn't make sense.
And we haven't even started on climate change and the fact that he's going to abandon all those climate change agreements that 195 countries signed up to.
I doubt whether he can.
Maybe he can't do anything, and this is all just like a joke.
Well, we live in hope.
I think you're excused, Afua, because you're of a generation that perhaps didn't know. But you should remember the generation when Gerald Ford was president. And the world was at peril because this was a man who couldn't walk and chew gum at the same time, and supposedly he was going to bring the world to an end. You know it's not real.
Yeah, but
they get in, it doesn't happen, Greg.
But what largely happens...
He's got Republican Congress, though. This time he can't.
Michelle thinks.
I tend to agree with you. I don't think it will happen.
Michelle, what do you think?
Well, I think he's made some quite sensible statements on defence, I've got to say. So I think this whole NATO thing, as we've already discussed, he wants people to pay their way. It blurs my brain that people would argue against that, number one. Number two, he's already come out and said that actually he wants to be more effective and efficient with the military spending because he feels very much that so much money is wasted. I think that's quite a sensible thing. Number three, he's said that he's going to get incredibly tough on ISIS and get a handle on that, and I don't think anyone's managed to at the moment, so I'm interested to see how that's going to play out.
Tell me how he's going to do that.
Well, I don't know what he's going to do. I don't even think he knows what he's going to do.
Bomb them to oblivion.
But what I think he will do...
there's nothing left.
But what I think he will do is take the threat of ISIS incredibly seriously instead of messing around on the edges and all the rest of it like a lot of other people.
So he's going to commit American... The only way you get rid of ISIS is American ground troops into the Middle East. He's going to do that?
Well, I don't know. I don't even think... one minute he seems to say he will, then he seems to say he won't. I don't know what he's going to do. Do you know what I'd expect him to do? I'd expect him to sit down, surround himself by proper experts, get the proper opinions and views of those people that truly understand this, and then take action, whatever that right action is.
And what makes you think that's going to be different to what Obama has done?
Well, under Obama, we've seen ISIS grow and grow and grow.
But presumably he's taken advice from the same experts. I mean, if Trump is outsourcing it to experts, you're going to get the same outcomes you had with the last president.
He will be. I think Trump will be much more decisive and much more actionable on this kind of scale.
You can't point to foreign policy as one of Obama's highlights, can you?
Well, you certainly can't point to it as one of Trump's respective highlights either.
Well, I mean, goodness me, he's not even moved into the White House yet. But in reality, I don't know how sure-footed Obama's been over the last few years.
Obama inherited a catastrophic
It's always someone else's fault with the left, isn't it? It's always someone else's fault with the left.
Have you forgotten what Bush did? You
the
can't argue
invasion
with that.
of Iraq in history will be seen as one of the great disasters of our time, and we're still living with the consequences.
And on that note...
Yeah, it's true.
It's me next, and I'm going to be explaining why these people are not necessarily stupid, homophobic racists. As a Yorkshire girl, I've been the butt of jokes for many years. Apparently, I'm thick, tight, I am a bit, and I wander around a field in a flat cap in my spare time, chasing whippets. However, far from being offended, I find these suggestions funny. Now, you might be wondering, what on earth has this got to do with the fact that Donald Trump has been elected the 45th President of the United States? Let me explain. I can safely say he wouldn't have got half as close to the White House if Americans with seemingly non-PC views weren't suppressed. Likewise, I don't believe Brexit would have happened if people here were allowed to discuss their genuine concerns without being branded offensive, racist, or xenophobic. I am fed up to the back teeth with political correctness. Quite simply, it's time for us to allow honest conversations and for the offended to start being less offended.
I'm staggered. Well, I didn't like the way the whippet looked me in the eye. That's what I really didn't like. I find... It depends what you mean by political correctness, doesn't it?
I mean, think you know what I mean, Greg.
If political correctness means you can't say offensive things about disabled people, offensive things about women, offensive things about ethnic minorities, then I'm all in favour.
Let me give you some context then to make it clear exactly what I mean. So, I think one of the reasons Brexit happened is because the Remain campaign was so afraid to even mention the word immigration. And it stems all the way back from, do you remember, was it Gillian Duffy, I think it was, when she said something about a legitimate concern. Gordon Brown told her she was, said behind her back she was a bigot. No, she wasn't. She was just a person that had a legitimate concern. And I think we have got to the point where if somebody feels something, it's suppressed, and then when it gets suppressed, what happens is, if someone's afraid of uncontrolled immigration or wants to discuss it, or concerned about the threat of ISIS and wants to discuss it, it gets suppressed. Someone then comes along with a much more extreme view. This ordinary person gravitates this extreme view, and then you have the situation that we've got with Brexit and with Trump.
I don't think that's what political correctness is. I mean, you can have any of those discussions in a perfectly rational, logical way. You can actually say, look, I think more immigration would be bad for this country for the following reasons. There's nothing wrong with that.
That conversation doesn't happen, Greg.
It's the use of the language that you have to be careful with.
You know, Michelle, on one level I agree with you. You know, I believe in free speech. I don't think it's healthy for people to not be able to say what they think. But I think we should all remember that so-called political correctness arose for a reason, right? There was a time in many people's lifetimes when you could put up a sign on your property to let saying no blacks, no Irish, you know, where you could assault someone like me, you could use racial abuse to speak to me, where women were spoken to in the most horrible terms.
Yeah, that's awful.
And now I think people who would like to do that use political correctness as an excuse for not being able to behave abusively. And I want to show you a clip from the Trump campaign which makes the point.
Your Twitter account has several disparaging comments about women's looks. You once told a contestant on Celebrity Apprentice it would be a pretty picture to see her on her knees. Does that sound to you like the temperament of a man we should elect as president? And how will you answer the charge from Hillary Clinton, who is likely to be the Democratic nominee, that you are part of the war on women?
I think the big problem this country has is being politically correct. I've been...
Are you saying, Michelle, that you would prefer a world in which there are no consequences for people speaking about women, for example, on the world stage like that?
No, that's not what I'm suggesting. I've done the British Apprentice, and if Ellen Sugar turned around to me and said, oh, I'm visualising you on your knees whilst I was in a boardroom environment, I would find that very odd, to say the least.
What's the alternative, Afua? A man says something inexcusable. I'm not here to defend it. He's put in stocks for the rest of his life? Is that what you want?
No, I'm not saying that's what I'd like.
People
but
say
I think
things they regret. People make ribald comments. I say for the 15th time, I'm not supporting the comments you've made. But you guys seem to want to live in a world that the minute you say that, that's it, you're written off.
No,
Michelle on this one is absolutely right. We only have this conversation about immigration now because of Brexit. The firm you used to run, the word was banned. There was never any reflection of people's views who thought they couldn't get jobs, who couldn't get on. It was like the Antichrist to mention that.
I would like
the BBC.
Yes, I am. Their coverage there was appalling.
I would like to point out that this week, Rachel and I were both accused of being politically incorrect for saying what we thought, thought about something which was very clearly happening in front of us. You know, Harry was reported to be dating somebody who had mixed-race heritage, Meghan Markle's. I wrote that I thought the press were being racist about her because they were referring to her background without saying it. I was told that I was reaching new lows for bringing race into the equation, when to me it was clearly part of it. And then Rachel wrote a column making a similar point, praising Harry for choosing somebody from a different background, and she's been pilloried in the press for that as well. So here you have an example of us expressing something that we have a view about and being told, ironically, by the newspapers who usually lambast political correctness, that we shouldn't be allowed to say it.
That's the world you've created, not you personally, but that's the world that has been created by the left, where people can't have... Even you, I'm very sorry to hear, and I hope you're not personally in any issues, and likewise... Well, I don't care, really. But I hope you're both OK. But you've created this world where people can't say these things.
But you see, nonsense. What nonsense? The Daily Mail, which is the paper that was the worst offender, in my view, has never subscribed to the world that the left created. But when it's convenient to them, they then will be happy to use it to silence someone with a liberal opinion.
I have to say, because I've been out of the country, I've not had
when Trump wants to be abusive towards women, he uses political correctness as an excuse. So while I think that there is merit in having a conversation about what we should be able to say and why free speech is important, I think that we can be really lazy and just use political correctness as an excuse for people who want to behave abusively, offensively, and in a way that can actually really incite hatred. You've seen Muslims in America this week saying they do not feel that they can safely walk around with their hijab on. They fear being physically attacked for being visibly Muslim. That's not funny.
No,
that's not just banter that shut down our political correctness.
But then let me come back to that, because what I would say about that is, in this country, last week or so, we've seen a gymnast get banned by the British Gymnasts Association from gymnasts for 2 months for having a private joke at a private event. There he is, a private joke about a private event about Islam. All hell broke loose, because apparently you must not dare to have a laugh, say anything that might be deemed offensive. It's utterly ridiculous. I look at that ban and I think that, for me, is one of the things where political correctness has gone absolutely mad. That guy has been toured around mosques, forced to be educated about Islam and all the rest of it. And actually, if he wants to laugh at something that other people may or may not find funny, that's up to him.
We should say he has subsequently apologised, but where do you draw the line?
He's apologised for saying it. That's what's interesting. He's apologised for...
What do you want him to do?
Well, it means he now thinks it was the wrong thing to say.
Right.
So he accepts that, actually...
Do you know what? He probably doesn't, actually. I don't know the guy.
We can't say that. Well, if he's apologised, he's apologised.
But what I feel is that, actually, when someone's made a private joke, if that's their view, then that's their view. And then what happens is they are absolutely vilified, shamed, made to feel bad. And it's the same as, like, the conversations about immigration. I know that I've made comments about wanting controlled immigration in the country, which I absolutely stand by. I've been told I'm a racist, I'm xenophobic, I'm really thick. No, I'm not.
No,
I just don't like the idea of uncontrolled immigration.
No, surely look at it in context. You know, the day after the Brexit vote, someone came up to me and said, oh, well, you'll be buggering off now then, won't you? You know, and it's like political correctness unleashed. When people feel freed from it, if you want to look at it as something that shackles people, it gives them licence to do and say things that are completely unacceptable. Now, I'm not saying I think it's good for people not to be able to speak about how they feel, because we all know that leads to the rise of extremism, right? And things go underground, which isn't healthy. But I think we need to acknowledge, you know, when you say political correctness gone mad, it's like you're forgetting why it came to exist. It exists. The reason that he's been made to apologise for that comment is because not very long ago, and still, Muslims get assaulted verbally and physically because of their faith. So whilst I agree with you to a point, I think that we need to remember that those rules exist for a reason, to protect people. And I want to live in a country where those people are protected. I don't know about you.
I'm not saying anything for fear of further offending
I wondered why you were saying
Kensington Palace. I just want to make one distinction between derogatory terms, which we all know what they are, and factual descriptions, which is what I feel I got into trouble with this week by referring to somebody's ancestry as African American, or in previous occasion, which we need not go into, Kenyan. Why is that racist, xenophobic, anti-political? You know, why is that not politically correct to use a factual description of somebody's background? Anyway, it's not now. You're not really allowed to add any tags to that, and that's the lesson
on which we walk.
Exactly, and I think that is regrettable, because this is a free country and we should have free speech without being incitement to any sort of xenophobia and racial hatred.
There you go. Amen to that.
Yeah.
Well, the pollsters got it totally wrong again. But how did we do with our predictions on the pledge? I think it's pretty clear which of us are really out of touch.
Clinton, and I think she's going to win well.
If we say it's over, then we only encourage Hillary supporters not to bother voting.
I know, they've all got to vote.
He's the barroom bore, isn't he? Really, is what he is. He's the bloke who sits in the corner, knows about everything, doesn't bother with the facts, a bit like you, Nick.
Yeah, I knew you were looking at
So we've got to a point in politics where somebody can become almost president simply on the grounds of being good on television and lying through his teeth and people not caring.
And all I hope is that on November the 8th, we put this Trump nightmare to bed.
I'm going to go Trump.
But I wouldn't be surprised if it was the fella.
Nick and I.
Hey, well done, kid.
Nick and I.
You Yorkshire lass.
High five
Well done.
over at the table. Well, we didn't put it to bed, did we? What can we say? That's what June wanted. It didn't get put to bed, but no, we called it right. You guys called it wrong.
I didn't call it at all. I just said it's a
Oh,
bar.
there they go.
I said it's a barroom bore, and I still think he's a complete barroom
I anticipated
bore.
that her voters would come out for her.
Bottom of the
You
pledge
guys
class.
are like, you're Nostradamus.
Well, that's it for this week. Has it really only been a week? For extra clips, follow The Pledge on Twitter or check out our Facebook page. See you next time. What can possibly go wrong by then?